Hello there everyone. Sorry it's been a little while. I'm really sorry to the young person that asked me to do a video about dyspraxia, but I've had a few dramas. My husband's not been very well. He only came out of hospital a week ago, having been in for 11 days. So that sort of happened straight very beginning of January, so it's all been a bit mad. But anyway, I can't really tell you much about the verbal dyspraxia because I personally don't have any experience of that, as my children all suffer from the physical side of dyspraxia. My experience with them, I'd say the first things I ever noticed, my older son who's just turned 17, when he was very little, he never held his head up as a baby. He was very, very floppy right from birth, and obviously all babies are a little bit floppy, but it was commented on. Every paediatrician, every midwife, all commented about his. They referred to it as head lag. His head sort of lagged around, and he didn't have the muscle control or strength in the muscles to support it. And this carried on for months. Whereas it being my first, I didn't know this wasn't the norm. So it's only sort of with hindsight I realised that was a worrying sign. He had low muscle tone generally, as I was told. He was £5.14, so he was quite little, and he was supposedly full term. But he was, a skinny little thing, and that's what I assumed everything was down to: low muscle tone, not being able to support his head. I just thought he was just a skinny baby. He never crawled. That's something I seem to have picked up as being down to. Again, he's also on the autistic spectrum, so it's hard to say which was from which area, but I think it's a combination. He didn't crawl at all. Literally, I was being told by physiotherapists, who are very important people to get in touch with if you have dyspraxia or you have concerns that your child may have. And they will also refer to occupational therapy, who are brilliant. But you need both these therapies really to make things better. Anyway, I digress. He was under physiotherapy from about a year of age. I think they sort of had got over this. It's delayed. Everything's delayed. So it got to about a year, and he wasn't showing any signs of being able to crawl. He was barely sitting up on his own, which is another thing I think was to do that we used to constantly have cushions around him. Whereas my friends' babies that were similar age, besides the fact they were crawling, and a lot of them crawled at sort of 8 months, 6 months, were sitting up. They've been sitting up for months. The odd little tumble, but my son, constantly. You'd have to hold him or prop him up with things. Even in like a baby walker, which I know most of these professionals don't recommend anymore, but back when he was little they did. I was constantly being told to put him in a baby walker, but I had to put a roll-up towel around his middle to support him because he literally would flop like this. Same in a high chair. This was all down to the muscle tone issue, which I believe is directly down to the dyspraxia. So like I say, a year, no signs of walking, barely starting to sit up. At 18 months, he started to bottom shuffle, rather than crawl. Again, in all this time, the physiotherapists were telling me constantly, lay him on his front, but this was a baby that, a child, you laid on their front, they couldn't turn their head, couldn't lift their head off the floor, and certainly couldn't prop themselves up on their hands in any form of crawling position, or even on his elbows. He literally would lay face down in the carpet and scream. And I was being told again by these physios to put we had a thing about rolled up towels underneath his belly and sort of hold him up by it like a pulley system, and try and get him used to being up like that. Like that would suddenly magically make his muscles able to understand. It didn't. He literally never crawled. Like I say, at 18 months, this was having physio for the whole of that time, he started to shuffle around on his bottom. And I was thrilled, I have to say, because it was the first real independence he was showing. He was doing something. It was movement. He could get from one side of the room to the other to get to whatever pile of toys he might have left over there. And he was brilliant at it. He had it down to an art. I've seen other babies do it, but I've never seen anyone do it like my son did. He could literally go one side and the other, and he would go so fast. And I was thrilled. Like I say, I thought, it's one side and the other, that's how your feet work. This is going to help him walk. I can remember the first time we were seen by a new physiotherapist for whatever reason. Unfortunately, did see the same different ones constantly, which doesn't help. You need more consistency than that, and you do have the right to ask for that. So this physiotherapist, and I went in all full of beans that yes, my son was bum shuffling. He was moving. To be told that's not normal. That's not what we want to do. We want him crawling. He's never going to walk unless he crawls. That's nonsense. Absolute rubbish. is because their textbooks say a baby crawls and then walks, pulls up, down, and then walks. My kids were never going to be textbook. That's all it was. You know, again, I was a young mum. He was my first. I didn't know any difference. Everything they said made you panic. They do. You know, kids have that effect anyway. But it's easy to make panic. So, like I say, he amazed me with this bum shuffling thing. And, I mean, he literally did not take his first steps or pull up to stand. He pulled up to stand and took, sort of toddling around the furniture, literally weeks before his very first proper steps. So once he knew what to do, he did it quickly. But like I say, I mean, it's still hard to sort of say it, but obviously I'm doing this video to try and help others. He was 2.5 years old when he finally pulled up to stand, took those first steps around the furniture and walked. You know, and if you picture any child at 2.5, he was a proper child by then. He wasn't a little toddler or baby or anything, he was a child. And that was hard. I mean, I had other mums, well-meaning mums, I don't doubt, you know. I was in a young mums group, so we were all similar ages. You know, when I say similar ages, I had him at 19. So in the area I lived in, that was a really young mum. It's not the same in all areas. I know that's not necessarily going to be a young mum in some areas. But where I was living, it was. We did have this little young mums group, and a lot of the other mums, you know, their kids hadn't had any of these difficulties. They'd all bog standard. They'd sat up at 6 months, walked at a year, all this. Could not understand why my son wasn't walking. I mean, I couldn't understand why he hadn't. So basically, a lot of it was I wasn't making him walk. I heard that one an awful lot. Fortunately, I heard it from, you know, members of the family occasionally would sort of suggest that you know, I'd given up on him somehow, and, you know, thoughtless things really, not meaning to be nasty, just not understanding or being able to try to understand. I had other mums take him by each hand and try and make him walk, things like that. None of that is going to work. Like I say, eventually changed physiotherapists, and this other one just was brilliant. She did things, one of the things she did with him, because he doesn't have the reflex, which is all to do with walking and everything, it's all to do with reflexes. He still doesn't really have the reflex that if he trips over to put his hands out to save himself. There's a name for that particular reflex, probably the saving reflex or something. But he didn't have that, and so he didn't have the thing to put his arms out, which is partly why he didn't crawl and things as well. She got one of those gym balls, you know, the big ones. People give birth on them and things as well, the really big like, beach ball things. And she used to lay him over on his belly and roll it forwards to get him to try and put his hands out as he reached the floor. And she would do it very slowly and tell him to put his hands out, and he got the hang of that. And that strengthened the muscles in his arms, you know, and his legs, obviously, because he went backwards. Like I say, he walked at 2.5. Difficulties he continued to have, because obviously dyspraxia, like many special needs, is a lifelong condition. He continued to have where, obviously, then went into school and nursery and things, and it was noticed very early on that his pencil control, so his fine motor skills, was an issue. You know, he didn't have very good pencil control. You know, colouring in, he tended not to be able to stay in the lines. He couldn't use scissors very well. He tended to avoid, because I was always told dyspraxic children, adults, whatever, will find ways around these things, or they'll avoid them. And he did. He tended to go down the avoiding route. Like in nursery, he started refusing to do any drawing. He wouldn't do painting. All this side of things. So that was one of the the things we picked up on. Then on to sort of more the gross motor skills, things like, I mean, this is something physiotherapists and occupational therapists will work on with you, is things like, obviously, throwing and catching. You'd be amazed how much coordination you need to catch a ball and throw it back to someone. You know, it's something we all take for granted, just boom, boom. But it's not. It's how to stop that ball from just flying and hitting you in the face, and how to angle it right to throw it back at that person, you know, not just throw it to one side. They did a lot of that. Pigeon toe walking, so back, you know, one foot in front of the other, heel to toe, things like that along a straight line to work with balance. Because balance is another issue with dyspraxia, not just coordination but balance. And spatial awareness, which is something, it's an ongoing thing. Like I say, he's 17 now and he's still, you know, it can be a bit clumsy to watch, you know. Spatial awareness is to do with understanding where your body is in relation to things around you, so that'd be why you might bump into people in a busy playground, which is what he happened to do a lot. And, you know, that would affect things like that. It also makes things like driving and stuff an issue. I mean, I've never been diagnosed, but my husband, through our experience, feels I definitely am probably dyspraxic, and I would agree, because I can't do anything remotely fiddly. You know, cutting a photo to fit into a frame, I'm just rubbish. I can't cut it straight, I cut too much, I just, you know, things like that. And I learnt to drive in an automatic, because I just couldn't get the hang of doing everything, coordinating everything at once. So there are ways round. As an adult, there are definitely ways round. Yeah, I mean, they have machines now for cutting out photos. guillotine thing to get someone else to do it. And you learn to drive an automatic, not the end of the world. Other difficulties that we see, like I said, the clumsiness, the falling over was a massive one in school. I mean, the school in the end had to employ someone just literally to be in the playground to keep an eye on him. This is when they first refused to statement him, which, you know, in the end I went on and fought for it myself and got them statemented. That's another issue. So, I mean, then you have tools that occupational therapy can give you. You have special cutlery. It has the area of where to put your finger and thumb to help with grip. Those are brilliant. My son still will quite often use that. Theraputty, which is like very thick Play-Doh, is to help strengthen the muscles in the hands. This is all things occupational therapy can advise on, and you can get a referral for them. You know, I think I speak to GPs, paediatricians particularly. You can get these referrals. You know, even for just asking for an assessment, that's the start of everything. You know, like I said, they are absolutely the best people to see over that. They can't make the diagnosis of dyspraxia, I have to say. They will tell you that themselves. It has to be a paediatrician or a specialist, depending on obviously what age you are. If you're an adult looking for a diagnosis, I'm not sure because I've never gone down that route yet. In my late 30s, I probably won't end up bothering. But yeah, it's always worth getting assessed. And like I say, they won't make diagnosis, but they are the ones that can give you coping skills. And dyspraxia is so much more known about than it ever used to be, even, like I say, 17 years ago. I mean, my son was diagnosed because I had a friend of a friend whose child had it, and I asked, is there any chance that's what this is? And ever since then, it's become blatantly obvious that that's, you know, what it was. And like I said, my middle son also has it, and they're querying it for my youngest, so it's actually quite a common condition. I know several adults that I look at now, like I say, including myself, that I think, God, if it had been known about when I was that age, I'd have been diagnosed like that. You know, things like, I mean, sewing, all sorts, anything remotely fiddly like that, I can't do it. You know, and it gets easier to admit that when you're an adult. I think when you're a teenager, things like that, it's harder to admit that because you're worried about being judged by your peers. But as an adult, I can quite freely admit that I'm hopeless to things like that. So that sort of thing does get easier. And my son, as for telling children they have it, my son used to blame himself. I'm no good, I'm clumsy, I'm stupid, I can't do this like my friends, I can't do that like my friends. Until the day I thought, no, I can't have him blame himself because it's nobody's fault. It's called a hidden disability for a reason. The day I sat him down and told him he was dyspraxic and explained how that was the reason he found all these things difficult, that he did fall over a lot, you know, the relief on his face. I'm denied, I dreaded telling him it. Well, how do you tell a child something like that? But it made a huge difference. So please, if you are wondering about it, or you feel you may have it, like the young person that contacted me, thank you so much for contacting me as well. That's a huge step. Well done. I hope I've been of some help. If not, please ask me any other questions you think I can help you with. And I just want to wish you, particularly the person that contacted me, and everyone else, the best of luck. And happy futures. Thank you.